Hey, it's the big baby. And I'm back and I'm podding. And let me tell you, if there's never been a podcast that you've wanted to watch, this one is the one. Because it's definitely going to be a great and heavy conversation, but it's going to be a conversation that I think is important for all of us, whether we are single, with no companion, no children, whether we're in a relationship, whether we're in a family, whether we're starting a family, no matter where you are in life. I think this is a very important conversation because, for one, I think it will help you, but I also think it will help the future generations. Have a good friend here, Marquita, today, and we're going to talk about the effects of your childhood and your development and mental health on your future. Okay. But for the opening monologue today, I want to, for one, give a shout out to Todd Dean, Trey Benham, and Scotland Smith. I think what you all did was absolutely amazing. I think that once you all were given information about a board member and an educator speaking in coded language about Black people during a time like this, it speaks a lot about your character, that you are trying to do what's best for your community, even though it may not affect you directly. So shout out to y'all. So for those who don't know, in Bartow County, there was a teacher who referred to the rioters and looters in Minneapolis as thugs. And then she was checked and someone said, hey, as an educator, you probably shouldn't be speaking like that. And her response was, they're thugs, so I'm pretty much calling them what they are. Again, I'm paraphrasing because I don't feel like pulling up the quote. Then you have a board member who said that they should use real bullets instead of rubber bullets. Again, paraphrasing that maybe they should use real bullets instead of rubber bullets to stop the people in the street. And this is my hometown, Cartersville, Georgia, Bartow County, a place that I love. A teacher in a school system that I attended and a board member of a school system that presided over my education. And having leaders like this is such a problem in small communities, in any communities, but especially in small communities, because these leaders are insulated by a community. They are welcomed by many members. Their thought processes go unchallenged because they are the majority, and there's not much outside thinking, progressive thinking that changes the place. And it makes me so happy that I left home. It makes me happy that I got to live in California. It makes me happy that I've got to meet people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, and from different places. Because there was a type of behavior that I grew up around, a racist behavior that I didn't even realize was racist. I'm happy that I've had a great awakening. I'm happy that I've had my eyes open to so much of the injustice that goes on in my little hometown, and I never realized it. I remember back in maybe middle school or early high school, a guy told me, he was like, you know what, AC? I don't really like niggers, but I like you. And I sat there and I was like, I don't really appreciate you using this word in my face, but thanks. And oftentimes I was like, you know what? You are the whitest acting Black guy that we know. And I was like, okay, cool. I guess we have things in common. But at that time, I didn't realize that they were demeaning my heritage, my people, that these people looked at me and they said, hey, you are similar to us, so we can identify with you. And I'm happy I had those moments. I'm happy that I was ignorant in those moments, because now I think it gives me a better place of understanding. It helps me when I see younger people or even older people partake in behavior that we might call coonish, behavior that we might call tap dancing or bootlicking. It helps me understand that everybody does not show up to the party at the same time. Everybody doesn't get it when you get it. And that's okay. Just understand. Make sure that you are open to understanding, open to education, so that you can finally move on with your life and get up and work to make things better for the Black community. And this is it's so damaging because it weighs on us and it impacts who we are as children as we project forward into life. So now I'm going to bring in my special guest, Marquita, and I'm going to allow her to respond to the monologue. Hey, Marquita, how you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm pretty good though.
Thanks for coming. So yeah, I just spoke about some of the things that I witnessed as a younger child, a teenager, and just the racism that goes on is going on in my hometown, and how I once thought it was, I didn't even realize how bad it was. I knew it existed, but now that I've gotten older, I've expanded my circle, and we've just become more racially conscious. It's like, dang, it's terrible over there.
hmm I think what you speak to is a lot of the fears that we see of um, how do I put this? People that are racist or have racist values and views. Their kids leave their small towns or the comfort of, like communities and travel the world and learn that the world is different. The world isn't how they painted it. The world shouldn't be racist. And then they come back and challenge their parents, right? So, parents try to keep their kids sheltered or connected within that community so they don't have that awakening that you had. But I don't think it's just a Cartersville issue. I mean, I grew up in Riverside, California, um, predominantly Mormon community. There was tons of racism that happened there. So I think
Not the
it's just
Mormons.
I think it's just good to really be open to stepping outside of your community, leave your small town, leave your big town, and explore what's different. Like I in undergrad, I went to school in Miami, and that was just completely different. I knew Hispanics, but Hispanics to me were just Mexicans. But going to Miami, Hispanic was Dominican and people that look like me. Um, so yeah, the world is beautiful. Like go out there and see it, because then you can go back and tell your parents, grandparents that they weren't right, and it's time to shake things up, start to challenge their way of thinking. But that is a lot of parents' fears too. Like, you don't want your kid coming back challenging you to be like, oh, well, you were wrong. Black people aren't XYZ. Mexicans aren't, horrible people. It's in their worst people. I met a Mexican that's an engineer or a doctor. Mom, what happened? So it's good when kids leave the nest.
Absolutely. And I challenge people to leave. And I'm not saying leave forever. You can always come back because I plan to return back to where I came from because I want to bring back some of that knowledge. But the thing about challenging the parents, I think that will, I really enjoy that because I think that as a parent, you've succeeded when your child is comfortable enough to challenge your original beliefs because they care so much about you that they want you to see a different perspective and not challenge in a disrespectful way, but challenge in a way that creates a conversation and understanding. So before I get to the first topic, I want to ask you just like who are you and why would I ask you to come on my podcast?
So you know my name. That's the gist of it. I am a clinical therapist. I predominantly work with children. I work with parents in the sense. I guess I work with adults sometimes. But I work with children. A lot of my work is in challenging those negative thought processes and external or internal lenses that people have. My background, I have a master's in social work. I have been in the mental health field for 10 years. And in the last, I would say 5 years now, my focus has been on childhood trauma. So, since we're talking about kids, we're talking about communities, we're talking about just the lenses that we formed. I believe that, you wanted me here to kind of put another perspective on what it means to nurture relationships with kids or underage people, and then having those healthy dialogues and being okay with shifting, growing, and changing.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And I think an important thing for the viewers to know that I've known you for about a year and a half, and we converse via Instagram pretty much daily. And you've had a lasting impact on my perspective on life because it's so funny that we can have a conversation. We can be ignorant one moment You can tell me I'm a misogynist the next moment. And then we can have a detailed conversation about the importance of mental health for people in our community, but also for ourselves. And it can just go back and forth. And the beautiful thing about speaking with you is that you're open-minded, but correct me if I'm wrong, you're rooted in very conservative values. So every now and then some of the conservatism will come out and I'll be like, yeah, there we go. I like that. But then we can have a totally different conversation, and it's like a nice progressive conversation that advances the conversation or advances our situation as far as Black people in America. Because I feel like every conversation that we have is there's something to always pull from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Black communities, we are rooted in the church a lot of times. So my foundation is the church and it is conservative, but going to school, I'm when I say like, oh, leave your community, like that's me. Like I went away to learn something different. I grew up around Mormon kids. I mean, I grew up in LA too, but in LA I was in the church. And then when I moved to Riverside, it's still a very
Yeah.
conservative community. And so, yeah, but I try not to take life so serious anymore. I try to just, you know, try to be open, try to be accepting. You learn and grow every day. I'm not perfect. So yeah, sometimes the sides you see of me is just like that natural like word vomit, and I'll just give it, and I'm like, ugh, or I think it's funny.
And that's the fun of it because we can word vomit each other to death, be ignorant, and then be serious. But we usually know like which voice is each voice, and it's beautiful. So just to get into our conversation, I think the impact of the home life is very important.
Mm.
Something I talk about privately. I may not have talked about on the podcast before, but one of the biggest compliments I give my parents is getting a divorce while I was young because they realized the relationship wasn't going to work. And instead of saying, well, we got a son, let's tough it out, they realized that the household could be possibly become too toxic for my upbringing. And I appreciate them so much for that. And I've thanked both of them to their faces about like, hey, thanks so much because I'm happy that I didn't have to grow up that way. And I think the home life is so important for the foundation of a young person, and it has generational impacts because oftentimes we raise our children based on the way we were raised, whether it's positive or negative. We take that and that's the formula we use moving forward, or we use that to create our own formula. And if you have a bad parent and you don't know that your parent was bad, you can end up becoming a bad parent who produces a bad kid, who becomes a bad parent, and so on and so forth. So tell me, just to start off, how important is the home life on young people?
So the simplest way I can think about it is just your parents are your blueprint to life, like you said. If I've learned what a parent is through the lens of a bad parent or abusive parent or a drug addict or an alcoholic, that's normal to me, right? And until like someone comes in and breaks that cycle, that curse, that trauma up, I'm going to continue to repeat it and so on and so forth. Like you said, the next generation is going to repeat that. So as a parent, the home that you presented, the home that your parents presented to you was, we as the adults will be mature and we will decide that it's healthier for us to be apart to successfully parent, right? And it taught you that yes, you try to make relationships work, but if they don't work, you don't force them to work, because the other end that comes from that is toxicity. It is abuse. It is poor relationship building. It is poor communication learning. And so you have to be, as the adult, accepting and responsible and mature enough to say, look internal. What do I want to give to my child? Do I want to give my child this crazy, yelling, angry parent? Or do I want to give my child this well adjusted? Yes, I make mistakes sometimes, but I can communicate those mistakes and I can teach my child how to navigate, right? Like as an adult. Because people assume, well, I have a child and I got to treat him like a child, but you're raising this child to be an adult. And so if you raise this child in a way that is in a negative way, that adult will turn into this negative example that they've seen their entire lives.
Absolutely. And for a quick shout out to one of my favorite teachers, Miss Jamila Suber. She and her husband, when they were, I remember watching them raising their kids because I was in high school and they had young children, and talking about how yes, we converse with our children even when they're young. We like explain things to them because like the explanation that a kid is a kid. Yeah, some things like yeah, you're a kid, and that's the answer. But for the most part, there is a rational reason behind things. And the earlier you start that conversation, is okay. You turn your kid into a thinker.
Hmm.
You expect discipline, but you allow them to think. And you talked about it's important that we raise our children to be adults. And oftentimes people don't challenge their parents because what we talked about earlier, they never leave the nest and get a different perspective to understand that, hey, my mom was wrong on this. My dad was wrong on this. And it's fine, but that's the importance of leaving the nest even temporarily. And that's not, and sometimes it doesn't take leaving your hometown. It just means leaving your circle, finding different people around you who have a different thought, because we always push for diversity all over, but we never talk about diversity of thought, because you and I, we have the damn near the same color of skin, but our thought processes are totally differently. So we offer different things in a room. But one big thing, and I've gotten beaten up for this for years, but you talk about the things we normalize in our household because if you see it, it's normal to you. And I
Hmm.
say one of the biggest issues with domestic violence is that too many people grow up watching it. They see it's okay. Mama and daddy love each other, and daddy might do this, mama might do that. And it's like, you can't tell me, I don't care what study you want to present to me. I don't care what book you're going to show me, what movie you're going to show me, what you're going to show me. My daddy and my mama like to fight each other, but they love each other. And that's what I know love to be, because the first thing love you usually witness is your parents. And I'm like, that's one of the big problems with domestic violence, is that people don't realize how bad it is because they watch it every day. And when somebody is guilty of it, I say, I'm not going to call them a bad person. I'm not going to say, whoa, 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 let's kill them, let's counsel them. Let's figure out where it comes from. Let's figure out the root of this problem, because I think that we figure out the root of it and then we try to fight it, it does more for us than just damning this person or incarcerating this person. But that's a conversation that we can get into later. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think sometimes, so when you talk about not shunning the person and accepting, not accepting the person, but teaching the person a different route, it's kind of hard for people to hear that piece because that's not our culture. Our culture is consequences, right? You do this, you're punished in a discussion. But
And
I
that's
think that's
stupid.
right. And so I that's what drew me to the social work profession because we are really focused on like restorative justice, right? Not like you said, not shunning a person, because you see behavior similar to domestic violence in the school system, right? Kids fighting, kids, you know, name calling in a derogatory, aggressive way. But like you said, it doesn't teach that kid if you suspend them and you're like, okay, go away. We don't want to deal with you anymore. You're bad. You're horrible. What did that kid learn? And like for that adult, what do they learn if every time you just throw them in jail or nothing happens and then that cycle keeps continuing and you just ignore it. You just turn your head to it. But on the other side too, because so many people have experienced domestic violence, we don't respond because we're also fearful. We're afraid of what that will look like, right? Because if you've experienced it, you're like, I've seen what an abuser can do if I speak up, or I've seen what a victim will do if I speak up, right? I've seen
Mhm.
what will happen after if I speak up. The victim may go back, but you have to learn to empathize with both. Like one of the social work values is dignity and worth of a person. You have to see the dignity in every individual human first, right? And I think that's one thing that I think we all miss. We see the bad and we're just like, oh, this person is bad, and that's it. We've shunned. We don't want them in our community anymore. Instead of saying, okay, let's be open to this person. Let's help this person grow and learn and develop, and make good choices moving forward. And that person, the abuser, needs just as much support in therapy and services as the victim.
Exactly, and I'm not going to get into my thoughts on pedophiles and such because that's a layer that has to be pulled back too, and there's a level of punishment that goes with that, but there's also some rehabilitation that needs to happen because it's like, yo, if you think it's okay to prey on children, not
Mm.
even just children, if you think it's okay to prey on people, why? What brought you to this place? And not that I'm excusing it, because I'm not ever excusing it. And those people deserve severe consequences. And I'll probably feel even more different once I have children of my own. But it's like, how do I stop you from wanting to do this?
There's
And I
always
know
a
throwing
why,
somebody
though.
behind a cage doesn't do it.
Yeah, and there's always a why. I In grad school they always ask you what population won't you work with, and perpetrators was high on my list. I was like, no, 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 no. I would never. I'm like you, like I can't. No, you touched a child, castrate them, get them out of here, like But I worked in community mental health, and I encountered children that were perpetrators. And it was no longer just a textbook definition of what a perpetrator was. This is my client, and he's kind, and he's just confused. And so he's also been victimized. And so that's your why as to, what happened in my profession. So we have to look past those kind of things that societal norms say get rid of them. Now I have to, really get in there and figure things out. And it takes a lot of doing some trauma work and just really connecting with the individual and understanding their story and then helping them shift their actions moving forward. So it can be
Exactly,
difficult.
because I can't even imagine how difficult it is because I just deal with normal adult. I shouldn't say normal. I deal with more typical problems that we are more willing to accept as problems
Mm,
and not necessarily cast judgment on the individual who has those issues. But I'll tell you, I think one thing that was interesting, you said you started talking about the children and the name calling and kind of the bullying thing. And the bullying dynamic is so funny because as somebody who grew up as a crybaby in a very conservative city, it's like, what you crying for? I don't know.
it hurts your
We
feelings.
gonna like you gonna get a whooping for crying. I'm gonna cry more now because I'm getting this whooping for crying. You understand? Like I cannot control my emotions like everyone else can, so I just cry. Like I've been embarrassed by this enough to where it's like I don't want to do this anymore. But what I learned is, okay, what makes me cry? Okay, how do I remove myself from these situations? Boom. And I think I talked about this at the Spark event last time I saw you in person. Was it's fight or funny? Everybody talks about fight or flight, but throw funny in there as well because you either learn how to fight, you get funny, or you just run from those situations. And I'm like, bro, I'm not gonna become a victim. So I got funny as hell. And then what does funny turn into? Oh wow, I can make jokes about people and people laugh first. Okay, I'm gonna shoot first just because, just to set the tone of the room, so I don't become the person who's shot at. And granted, my behavior, my discipline's not so much that I became a person who I think really victimized people. Maybe I did in high school because I was young and dumb and didn't know any better. But as my frontal lobe developed, I realized, okay, like this is a defense mechanism that I use.
Mm-hmm.
And I still continue to use it because I haven't dealt with the problem that I probably should deal with. Probably should go to therapy, but black men, we don't
Mm-hmm.
go to therapy.
Actually, there's a whole website for Black men to go to therapy and find good therapists. But yeah, I no,
You
seriously
make me
though,
sick
bully.
sometimes. But I mean, you're right. You're right. But you're over here making me learn and grow and stuff. You know how I feel about growing. I stopped growing in the 10th grade.
But no, I think our generation and generations before us, we do invalidate bullying, but bullying is like a significant problem. And I think it's gotten worse because of technology, right? So think about in our age, we could go home and not be bothered by that bully no more, right? Like that bully might
Mm-hmm.
bother me at school. They might see me at lunch, but I'm going home, I'm close my door. My mom's gonna love on me, my dad's gonna play games with me or whatever. I'm gonna have a good time with my family. Now it's like, okay, this bully bothered me all day at school. They might have recorded all the crap that they said to me. Now they put it on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Like I can't get away from it. And so then that becomes the added pressure. So a lot of times when we talk about like why trauma is so significant, trauma is like a repeated event or it's a large significant event. But like in bullying, it's a repeated event for these kids. And so usually trauma can be balanced out with positives, but if I'm consumed constantly with all of these negatives over and over and over on all different platforms, and more people are joining in because on social media, people join in, kiki, want to laugh about things.
Yeah, boy.
It becomes something that it's harder for the younger generations to recover from. You like you said, your defense mechanism became to be funny, but could you imagine like 1,000 people sharing the thing that made you cry? It's kind of hard to, bounce back and be funny about it because you're like, dang. Especially if those 1,000 people don't think you funny and they don't get behind your ha ha ha, right?
Man,
Like
come
then
on
you're
now.
like, dang, it's a
Let's be real here. I don't think I've ever been in a room since the age of probably 16 or 17 that most of the room didn't think I was funny.
okay. Well, that works for you. Some kids don't have those defense mechanisms. We don't think the whole world is funny,
No, they ain't, because a lot of people who
right?
think it's funny get paid for being funny ain't funny. Kevin
Right,
Hart, Amanda
right.
Seales.
Oh, well, don't go for Amanda. Don't do it,
You know what my Wi-Fi password is?
Amanda Seals.
And a
Amanda
nice
Seals
word before.
blocked me or got me removed from IG should be your password.
Well, it's her name and a word that rhymes with duck.
Oh, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to
But
know. Amanda
I
Seals, we love you, Black
you,
Queen. Don't listen to him.
no, I love Amanda Seals, and I thank Amanda Seals for our interaction because it actually made me think about what I'm doing with my platform. And I don't want to be a troll, and I want to make sure that I'm promoting positivity, even when I'm calling
Okay,
people out.
okay.
But you talked about the kids taking the bullying home, and I think the one of the biggest issues with the bullying thing is because it becomes an internet thing.
Hmm.
These people can be internet bullies, but they can't be bullies in anyone's face. Like it's the people who can text you and tell you all about how they feel or hit your DMs about how they feel, but it's like you see the person in the bar and they don't want to say a word to you. It's like, whoa, you can't shoot your shot at the bar. And it's the same thing with the bullies. It's like, dang, you can't even get your jokes off in somebody's face. You gonna wait till you get on Instagram? It's like, come on, man. Like, let's grow up. If you can't have a conversation, and I talked about this in my opening monologue. What was that, Monday, Tuesday? I get my days mixed up. When I was talking about cancel culture and how we're so quick to cancel people, but we'll cancel them without a conversation. And most of that is because we're afraid of true confrontation. Ooh, that alliteration was amazing. Good wordplay, Adam. Sorry.
I think it's
See,
true
I'm
though,
funny in
because
every room I go in.
when you cancel people, it is easier to not ever talk to them again, right? And dismiss them or not see their side. But I think also rooted in cancel culture, sometimes people are just tired of having to explain themselves. Because sometimes people get canceled for
Absolutely.
stuff and you're like, girl, or this, what? You should have known. We've had this discussion several times. Or someone else has gone through this several times. Like, enough is enough. So I do think that there is a piece of that where people are just like, okay, it's just enough. But I think that's also just the internet world. That's just what we do now. Like, if we don't like you, and I don't know if I've seen it where it's like we don't like you. It's you've done something stupid, and we're like, that's enough. But it goes back to our culture. Like we get rid of people. We don't try to repair people.
And it's funny though. I think you and I are at a pretty good internet age, and I'm probably at the younger end of the internet age. That's like cool. Is that like I still had there was a point in my life where I had to like memorize phone numbers.
Oh,
I know.
okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
I'm
thought you
not
were trying to
aging
throw
you.
shade. I thought you were
No,
trying to.
no,
I
no,
was
no,
like, I
no, no,
was
no, not at
married
all,
to
not
you,
at all.
so
No,
I
no, not
still
at
be
all. But
part of
I'm
it.
saying we were one of the last groups who didn't grow up with just a smartphone, like having a
Oh,
smartphone. You remember when like you were like cool as hell for having a smartphone. Like everybody didn't have no smartphone, right?
And you had
Exactly.
money. You had money.
Exactly. Whereas, so with that, you still had way more real human interactions. So I remember having a phone, but not having a text plan. That it was to call.
Yeah,
You
because
had
it
to
costs
talk.
to text. It costs. And you had to talk after a certain time. Or
After
no.
9, if you had like Sprint or
After
something, it was
9.
after 7. But most people were after 9.
Yeah, I had
And
AT&T was after 9.
so I remember that time very familiar. I'm familiar with that time, and most of the way that I move still reflects that time because again, that was the norm back then. So now you see these younger people who have never had to interact with people ever. Like you could sit at school, be the quietest person all day long, the weirdest, nerdiest, whatever you want to call it, but then have the funniest IG, TikTok, Snapchat. Excuse me. Excuse me.
I hope you don't got COVID. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you know what? I've been quarantined for 4 months, so I'll just stay here longer. But but you can be like the quietest person in person, but then like have the most personality on social media, and then you could be 20,000 followers of people who don't know you, then the 20 people who actually know you be like, oh, man, you corny.
No, you're right. And I like, especially working with kids and getting back into the school system, I've definitely seen that where I'll talk to my kids and I'm like, hey, so tell me who's your best friend. Oh, it's such and such. Oh, okay. Do they go to this school? No. Where do they live? Oh, I literally had a student say her best friend lived in Japan. I was like, have you met them? Like, what? Wait, what? How old is this person? And like, they just don't know. But like you said, they brag like I have 1 million followers on TikTok. I do this and I do that, and I'm like, where are your social skills here in real time? Where are your connections on the campus? How do you commit to being a part of the community that's here with you face to face? And I kind of liken it to Wally. I thought Wally when it first came out, I was like, "Ooh, that's so fake and that's it looks horrible." But
Why?
it's like, do you remember when they were like floating around just watching
Haven't seen it.
TV?
Just haven't seen
Oh,
it. Just had a ring text tone back in 2010.
yeah. I think the way that our kids interact definitely reminds me of Wally. Like it's just completely disconnected. But you know what? In return, I love to see them out and protesting. Right? I'm like, I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
Connect with your community. Do it.
Have
And
you been to any protests?
I have. I'm here in
Have you
Phoenix. I
talked
went
to the
to.
people out there?
I have. I have.
Good conversations or bad?
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I haven't had the best experience at the protest. I see a lot of young niggerdom as I can't even think of a better word for it. And I think it's misguided passion. And I'm never one to say, hey, you're doing this wrong because you're younger than me, because I've seen that the young ideology, it hits a certain group, it hits a demographic that I can't touch. So I get it. But then also I'm like, hey, why are you here?
Hmm.
Black Lives Matter. Okay, yeah, okay. So what are we going to do to make Black Lives Matter? Protest. All right. After the protest, because the protest is just the icebreaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do once we get in the door? Like if somebody from City Hall says, "Hey, I want to talk to you right now. What do y'all want?"
Mm-hmm.
We want justice. What is justice? I don't know. Okay. Who's the leader here? I don't know. I just got a text about it.
Hmm.
And again, not to diminish it or slow it down, but as I'm becoming an OG in the game, right? You have to make sure the young ones know, hey, look, you go out here and you raise the hell, all the hell that you want to, but make sure that you know what you're raising hell for. And when you get the opportunity to try to go to heaven, right, you know what it takes to get there.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's incumbent on us, people our age, who have seen a little bit of both sides, who are in a place to where we're more established in our careers, because we're not going out here on so much of all this radical stuff, because we got bills to pay, we got families to feed, we have stuff that's riding on this, that we provide the wisdom that we wish we had when we didn't have as much to lose, so that those people can go out there and make those decisions.
Yeah. So my experience was opposite of that. But I did a lot of research before I went out and protested. One, because of COVID, and I was like, I cannot be risking my health. But two, because I did see how chaotic some of the protests were. And so I really followed. There's two entities. I can't think of I think it's Potter Nation. It's a Hispanic
Okay.
led group. And then there's Black Lives Matters Phoenix. This protest I went to was very organized, very thought out, but the age demographic was wide range, right? So it wasn't just Gen Z, there were millennials, there were people, what Gen X? What do they call the people that's outside of millennials?
Uh,
Yeah,
so it's
whatever.
Gen Z who are the youngers, then it's us millennials, then it's Gen X, then it's the boomers.
Okay. Okay, so no, there was Gen X, maybe some boomers, maybe. But the protest I went to specifically went to a city commission's meeting to protest defunding the police. And so that was like the first time
Quick thing, for the sake of this platform, I don't like to use the term defunding, not because I know it's the proper term used, but once we follow defunding, I want to I want to say reallocating, so that for those who don't realize what defunding is, they don't get afraid and they understand that it's just a reallocation of funds from the police department into other areas that need more funding.
Yeah, so I was going to speak on that a little bit because that was the first time I've heard that. And so I was like, defund, what is this? But they did such a really good job of breaking it down. They talked
Mm-hmm.
about the lack of police support, engagement within the community. They highlighted some things that the police have done in the community that they did not agree with. But then they also talked about instead of giving this funding, and I don't think they were talking about defund, I think they were just requesting that they don't increase the budget for police. And instead of increasing that budget is by 25% that they were looking to increase, they were saying, take the 25%, and this is where we think that money should be redistributed in homelessness, in mental health, and education. And to me, I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Hello, I work in a school system. Hello, I have worked in community mental health. I know the lack of resources that we have. I work in a school now. Sometimes I have to buy my own like social emotional learning tools. Sometimes I have to buy my own resources to teach my kids, to make healthy like coping skills. I have to buy,
Garbage.
right, right. And so when they were like, take the money from the police because they're not really doing what they're supposed to be doing within our community. I have kids in my community. You go in their neighborhoods. So when we first got shut down, I went into neighborhoods and my mother-in-law donated money for people to get groceries. I went in
Mm-hmm.
their neighborhoods to give them these gift cards. They had no grocery store in their neighborhood. They have to drive 15, 20 minutes to a grocery store. There's no walking grocery store. And this is Phoenix, a major metropolitan city. Gentrification. I won't jump down that rabbit hole, but
But
they have
some
no,
people say they need to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and stop being lazy.
well, they don't even have bootstraps to pick up. The playing field is not the same, right? Like, how I'm going to tell you, oh, to start to run the race when you don't even have the proper shoes to run that race.
You got to run barefoot because you know better, and and your feet are
Mm,
stronger than other people's shoes, right? But to bring it back to the home life, right? It's the impact of home life is so important to try to make the race that much more even, right? Like, I'm not even going to get into the racial race that we already start, 100 meters behind and we only run at
mm,
200 meters. But I'm not going to do that one today. But there is so much that parents can do that they don't even realize that they can do that has an impact on their children. My mom, she's worked in education for the last 20 plus years. That was a major benefit for me. She's a registrar. So the great thing about the registrar is she knows where she's sending transcripts to. She knows where kids end up
mm,
going to college at. So
mm,
she gets to see what it takes to get to this college.
mm-hmm,
So she was probably 10 years into the job, maybe a little bit more. I've been out of high school, 10 years now? Yeah, she's probably 10 years into the job by the time I get to high school. So she's seen kids from
oh,
Cass High School, which is not a great high school and not from a great educational area of Georgia. Like if you go to UGA, you made it. And nothing wrong going to the local state school, but you see what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
She saw what it took to get into the schools that I said I wanted to go to, and she was like, "Okay, this is what you need to do. You need to have this GPA. You need this SAT score. You need to be in this club. You need to be in this many clubs. You need to have this many community service hours." And just having a full understanding of what it took to achieve that goal, and that put me steps ahead of people who were far more naturally gifted than I am, but they just didn't have the structure. And so often we don't have, especially in our community, there's no structure in the house, not because there's not a desire for structure, but if I'm trying to survive and not thrive, I don't have time to learn what it takes to make you to be great, right? I got to figure out what it takes to keep you alive, to keep this house afloat. And I know my home life put me a step ahead of so many people because, again, it was stable. I moved once growing up, and that was my mom who moved back home to live. We moved from our grandparents' house into our own house. That's not a real move. We moved 2,000 feet away, right? And I grew up in a fairly stable family around me with so many positive role models, whether it was people who went to college, got jobs, went the corporate route, or even went the self-employment route. I had so much of that around me to where it's like, I've not wanted for too much of anything that I needed. I've wanted for stuff that I want, but we all do that. So I know that set me up for where I'm at today. And I think that's missing. As someone in the school, how do you deal with kids whose parents don't get it? And not that the parents don't get it because they don't want to get it. It's that they don't have time to get it.
So what I like to tell my parents, even when the outside world is chaotic, in your home, it's good to focus on what you can control, right? You can control your child's outcomes by what some of the things you simply just said. But it takes you taking that extra step to realize that my anger, my frustration with my outside environment, if I bring this into my child, is not going to contribute to healthy outcomes. So you've got to make that conscious effort to say, okay, I'm pissed. This job sucks. I may be being harassed on the job. I need to leave that at the door. And I need to be present for my child. I need to be present at their school. I need to be present to their emotional needs. I need to be connected to a community. Sometimes, like as a therapist, of course, it's natural for people to need to say, "Oh, go to therapy, go to therapy." Yes, go to therapy, but also develop your healthy communities because you can't do it all. The things that you just listed, Adam, you didn't just say, "Oh, my mom did it all by herself." You had a strong community around you. You had your
Absolutely.
grandparents, right? So sometimes we disconnect from
And
our community.
great uncles and aunts too, just in case one of them listen. Like they all provided a great community, and I was the
Yeah.
only one who grew up single parent around my family on the family road. And not to say that I felt like a son to the rest of them, because I didn't. I felt like a nephew, but I felt like more than just a nephew. And one of my cousins, he's getting married in November, and I'm the best man in his wedding. And I joke with him and his little brother about, as an only child, raised as an only child, it's crazy that I get to have a big and a little brother because we were that tight, and their family took me in, and I don't say embraced me, right? Let's say embraced me, and I could feel at home with them, and like it's been an amazing experience, and yeah, I appreciate the support system outside of my home for that. But back to what you were saying, because we're here for you, not me.
So when you were talking about like the infighting and things like that, that's the things that we can control. We can control, sure, have those hard conversations, but still be connected to your community. Have good moments with your community. It shouldn't always be about community fighting. Like be that support and then allow that support to come in. Allow for that, the village, the concept of the village, allow the village to correct your child. But sometimes people don't do that because they don't choose their community right. They choose their community because, like, well, they're my family. Your community doesn't have to always be your family. Your community could be really close friends or intelligent people that you want to nurture and develop and grow your child. So on those days where it's hard, your community can tap in and still continue to support your child and provide those skills like your mom provided to you of what to do to go to college. What does that look like? How do you prepare for that? How do you plan for that? Your kids don't need to be burdened by all of your chaos, right? And so having that community will allow you to step away sometimes and say, you know what, this weekend you're gonna stay over at Uncle Blah, Jimmy house, and you're gonna hang out and he gonna teach you something. Next weekend you're gonna do this, or and but that also gives you some time to self-repair, self-reflect, and maybe grow.
Can I rant for a hot second?
Go for it, sure shall.
So, for one thing, you talk about the family community. My uncles taught me a lot of stuff that my dad wasn't present to teach me, and it was beautiful. Going to my cousin's house was absolutely amazing. Let me tell you a little something about family, right? So often we think that family is just because we have the same last name or we have a common ancestor, relative. And there's this old term, blood is thicker than water. And that sounds good on the surface. It sounds beautiful on the surface. But let me tell you, though, that the more important thing, the thing that makes blood thicker than water is investing into the relationship. And just because we share a last name, we share a common ancestor, that does not mean that I favor you over other people who have put in time and invested into a relationship. Because once the relationship becomes inconvenient, the people who you hear from, the people who reach out to you, the people who give a damn about what you're going through, that's what becomes family. Last name don't make family. Life experiences, support, love, that's what makes family. And for people who don't understand that, for people who want to live in their own bubble and think that because we have the same last name, we have the same this, we have the same that we're supposed to support one another no matter what, that's not how it works. Because if I don't hear from you on Monday or Tuesday just to say, hey, how are you doing? How's life been? I ain't heard from you in a minute. Is everything okay? But then I hear from you when you need something, when you want something, or just on a holiday. No. Because my family, as an only child, right? You look at the family dynamic so much differently because you have to get outside of your house to find family, right? As an only child in a single parent house, you have to go everywhere to find the things that you need because mama can't do it all. She do her best, but she can't do it all. So you start taking off all these different masks of what people think friendship and family is, and it's like, you know what? My family aren't the people who I have the same last name as necessarily. They're the people who support me, who give a damn about me, who check on me, who I check on, who will, if they don't hear from me for 3 days, they say, bro, you okay? I ain't talked to you in a minute. That's what family is to me. But again, I had to get that rant off. I needed that.
No, but you're right though. Like to me, I can think. I grew up in a single parent household. My dad passed away when I was 6.
And your mom's the GOAT. Shout out to Miss Tara.
Yeah, she
TMZ Tara.
TMZ Tara. But my community was my family. But my mom had some friends in her life, but I didn't connect with them as my community, right? But they were close to my mom. They nurtured the relationship with my mom, but I never felt like they nurtured, like you said, that relationship with me. They never made that connection, even though I hung around these people all the time. When I became an adult, I reflect back on those relationships and I was like, and so as an adult, I shifted and was like, that's not my community. But I have amazing people around me that I've chosen to connect with. So I always stress to parents to do the work and to repair and build your community and nurture those relationships and all those wonderful things. But I also want to encourage adults as you transition into adulthood to remove that, well, my mom didn't do this or my dad didn't do this. At some point you can no longer blame them, right? You have to start acknowledging some of these things, and the more you learn, the more you grow. When you leave the nest and you start to develop a knowledge outside of your home environment, it's important to start making some of those changes that you want to see. That's what, in my culture, Black culture, church culture, we talk about generational curses. The more you know about those curses and those traumas or those behaviors that you don't like, it's important that you make the changes and you don't sit in this position of woe is me, or well, this all happened to me. No, no, no. Do what's necessary to fix those things. Don't wallow in that and think like, well, my mom never developed my community, or my community was crap to me, or my family was so horrible to me. Okay, I acknowledge that. I validate that. What do you do to move forward? How do you make your own family or your own connection? Because you're right, it doesn't always have to be family. Last name is just a last name. If your family's toxic or if your family's horrible to you.
Yeah, exactly. Like the person that people can see in the background, that's my guy Rue, and I talk to him all the time. And like he's like family to me. And he don't even want this shout out. But it's funny you talked about generational curses and trauma because I had skipped the notes in between the others to get to pivot here. And there are so many generational curses and trauma that we've experienced. I just think about my grandmother at one point was got paid to pick cotton. It's like, no, she wasn't a
Mm,
slave, but like my grandma picked cotton. You know,
mm-hmm,
like schools were segregated and like
mm-hmm.
while my mama was growing up because things get passed, but they don't necessarily move at the same speed that they should. So it's like, Jesus Christ, like my mom went to a segregated school.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And we think we've moved so far, and not even just to talk about just different things of race, but how do we break some of the generational curses and trauma that we're experiencing as a people, in your opinion?
So sometimes we don't even know that they exist, right? Because we, like you said, we normalize them. That's normal, right? That's just what we do. But you have to really be introspective. You got to look internal and think about what are some of the behaviors that I present with, right? Because trauma will present itself as a behavior. I know movies will have you think like, oh, it's this grandiose flashback that I'm gonna have, and it's just going to come to me that this trauma occurred to me. Sometimes your brain blocks those because it wants to protect you, but you will repeat those traumatic experiences through the way that you act. And so you have to think about these behaviors. Think about, why did I lose these friendships? Why do I keep losing these relationships? Or why do I keep attracting these kind of people? Or why do I keep attracting this kind of community? Or why, when someone challenges me, do I lash out? And even if their challenge is in a gentle way, I flip a switch and I snap. So when you recognize those kind of things and you're really ready to be honest with yourself, those are the ways that you can start addressing your trauma. And so some of the first steps to addressing your trauma is just acknowledging it, and then developing healthy coping ways to cope, right? Because our responses to trauma are negative coping. Like you said, it's your defense mechanism. You're just doing what you got to do to protect yourself. But now that you know, like, those defense mechanisms may not be working, or they may be working, but how long will they work, or how will they help you thrive in other facets of your life?
Like
And then
15
you'll
years
have
has
to,
been working good for me.
yeah, but eventually you might with a woman and she's like, okay, Adam, I'm being serious, and you always want to make a joke.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that right now.
Hmm. So yeah, so that's what you got to think about when it's something that's important to you. How do those defense mechanisms hinder that thing that's important to you? And so then you got to start actively making choices to develop new healthy coping skills. Some of my favorites that I always hear about: deep breathing is really good, but there's some simple ones that you can do. Just get some sleep. I do one with my kiddo: smell the cookie, blow out the candle. Very simple, very easy to remember. Don't be breathing all hard and fast. Yeah, right. But
Get some
sometimes you,
sleep, but how do you sleep when you're a grinder and you're a workaholic, man? It's 24. It's only 24 hours in a day. If my eyes are closed for more than six of them, I'm wasting time.
yeah, but you can't function if your brain has not got enough sleep. It's not healthy. Long term is not healthy. People will outlive you because you're not sleeping. And guess what? Your grind will be over and you will be out of the race because you're not taking care of yourself. The first thing that you can tell your body that you value it and that you want it to live a long, healthy life is just by meeting its basic needs: eating a well balanced meal, getting good sleep, taking care of yourself throughout the day. Also, finances, like having like a good balanced finance life is really healthy because people have the most stress and anxiety around money, right? So if you're overspending all the time, that's not good either. That's poor coping strategies. And it's usually rooted in something else, right? You spend your money to kind of like escape from the realities that you don't want to address. And of course, there's other coping strategies that we talk about that people want to spend their money on because, society has co-opted self-care and they want you to spend your dollar. But I come from a practice of you don't need to spend money to take care of yourself and be good to yourself. And that's the first step a lot of times to tell yourself that you're worthy, that it can, self-care is supposed to be an affirming process, that you deserve better. You deserve a new outlook on life. You deserve what is good. You're a good person just by some of those simple things. Talking to people, going for a walk. Those are all good, healthy skills. And then if your trauma is really rigid and it's something that you feel like, okay, I've done these coping strategies, but I still need something more, therapy is a really good way to start processing. Why do I go down these roads, or why do I respond the way that I do? Therapy isn't going to solve your problems, and a good therapist isn't going to give you all the answers. They're going to give you the tools to start unpacking all of your crap.
Quick question for you: when are you going to get a podcast?
Someone asked me. No, they didn't ask me if I was going to do a podcast. Someone was asking me about doing like daily IG lives. I don't know yet. It can
Don't
be
sell
tricky.
yourself short. Don't sell yourself short with daily
So,
IG lives. It's hard to monetize that.
Okay.
You're better than a daily IG live.
It gets tricky though because with client interaction, because I work with such a young population, I have to be mindful of what I put out there, and just my students, my clients always want to find me on social media. Miss, are you on Instagram? Mommy, what's your name? So I have to really sit down and think that through before I jump into that world. I do follow wonderful therapists, so I know it can be done. But I have to think it through. It's for ethical reasons.
Fair, and I'm not gonna get into that, but just understand that just having this conversation with you, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm enjoying listening to her talk more than I enjoy hearing myself talk. And I like to hear myself talk. I listen to my own podcast because I like it so much. So it's
I've had
like,
friends want to do podcasts with me, so I've heard it before.
Hey, look, I'm just happy that you are here. And it's funny, when my podcast took its first major spin, you were there for that. The first time like I introduced like a actual co-host, somebody to like guide the show and allow me to be a personality for a little while, but not just go into a black hole or a rabbit hole that nobody wanted to hear except for me. You were there that day, so thank you for being part of the cultivation of this thing that's turning into something that matters to people. And I only say that it matters to people because I get random texts and DMs like, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. And I go, bro, you can just ask me my thoughts on it. You don't have to wait for the pod. No. Don't get me wrong. Now, if I don't rock with you, you got to pay for these thoughts. You got to listen to the podcast. Like, you don't get my perspective on stuff for free. But hearing that made me realize, oh shit, I matter to people. But let me see. Let me get where we're going, because we talk about these generational curses, man. And I think the scariest thing about the generational curses is that and we're gonna keep hitting this one, is you don't realize the generation before you was wrong. Like, the biggest generational curse is not developing free thought and not knowing that my mom didn't know what the hell she was talking about when she told me to do that. Well, my grandmama and them, no, I know y'all live this way, life is like this for y'all. Y'all were wrong. And there's nothing wrong with them being wrong. It doesn't change how you feel about them, how you love them, but it's just being able to admit it. And one of the things I think our community, a curse that we have, is that we don't acknowledge health, well, for one, health, period, because you can be physically unhealthy and like, oh, no, I ain't going to no doctor. And you don't even acknowledge that mental health is a thing. And I think some of it is just the mistrust for systems here in America. It's just like, you just want my money. Why should I pay you to do this when I'm still going to be this way and you're not going to help me? But how can we increase mental health awareness in the Black community?
I think it starts with representation. Faces like myself, normalizing that. I always tell people that aren't African American or that aren't brown people, it takes a lot of relationship building to normalize mental health to our communities. I learned early on it takes connecting sometimes to the church to normalize mental health in our communities, right? Because as much as our generation wants to shift from that, the church is still a significant in entity for a lot of the people in our community.
Absolutely. Even if you don't agree with the institution, because I have a lot of issues with the institution that is the church. I
Hmm.
don't like somebody asking for my money who's living better than me.
Hmm.
But I also understand that it's another tax and you need money to make the church run, but also that it is a place where you can find like-minded individuals who you can become vulnerable with, and you can be in a disgusting, dirty place and still get a great message from it.
Hmm. Hmm. Class I took in grad school, they really talked about the systemic piece though of mistrust, and even now, like there's a extensive history of just medical mistrust, mental health mistrust in our community. How they've abused their power. We trusted them, and then our outcomes were detrimental to a lot of people that look like us. So we don't trust them. And then, like I said, now you have still African American women dying at an alarming rate when they're giving birth. Like that's something, first world country, you would think that's normal. Like, okay, you're just going to give birth. We'll see you when the baby comes. It's beautiful, exciting. And you have very wealthy people coming out like, I almost died or my wife died. It's hard. And so I do think the big piece is more of us getting into the profession, having these discussions. I think that's one reason why I've been so open to broaden um, my discussions around mental health, because I do think it can be very helpful. The access to mental health, it is, I think, can be very life changing. I go to therapy. I'm a therapist. I go to therapy. Before I got my master's, I started to go to therapy, and I think it really changed my trajectory as far as how I've always been outspoken, but I think my outspokenness was rooted in anger for a long time. And so then going to
No,
therapy,
you
I
angry?
and so going to therapy, I think it allowed me to continue to be outspoken, but it allowed me to address my own personal issues and not personalize interactions when I have them with people, and not project my own internal anger on a simple discussion. Now, sometimes people just throw me off and I will, go there with them. But now when I go there with you, it's not because of my own anger that I'm holding in. I'm not projecting the anger that I held from my childhood when I'm going at you. I'm going at you because it's probably what needs to happen right now. But I do
Under-
think I'm sorry. I think, like I said, the representation is important. Community engagement is important. Connectedness through relationships is important. And being okay with navigating those difficult relationships, because the barrier is going to happen. That barrier is because of the systemic issues that we have in this country with the abuse of power that has been imparted on Black communities for centuries. So, in decades, it's just the natural progression that you have to work through. But if you're in this profession and you're working with minority groups, those things you always have to keep in mind. Don't assume they're not like all Black people. We all have that stigma where we think we cannot trust this doctor, we can't trust this social worker, she's gonna be all up in my business. Cultural, we don't tell our business, right? Like what happens in this home stays
That's
in this
that's
home.
the that's the problem, that we don't tell
Don't.
our business. Like we don't
Hmm.
even want to tell the person that we living with, or the people we're closest to our business, because we're worried about being judged, when it's like they might actually help us, because
Right.
people knowing your business don't change the business.
And I always encourage people, like finding a good therapist is like dating. You don't always find the right therapist, and don't think, oh my God, this one therapist was horrible, I'm never going back. No, you do your research and you keep going until you find the right fit. Because we're human. The person as the provider is a human, you're a human. Every fit isn't a good fit. And so it's okay to say, like, this therapist is not a good fit for me. I like to find in all facets of my life Black women to be my providers, medical, dental, mental health, especially mental health. Because of my own childhood trauma, I don't want to be demonized for some of the discussions that I'm wanting to have. I don't want my parents to be demonized for some of the discussions that I want to have. I want to have an honest conversation about the whoopings that I got growing up and how I feel they impacted my life without you being like,
Oh my
I,
God. You got
uh-huh,
a
uh-huh,
whooping? Your parents
uh-huh,
beat you? No, they didn't beat
uh-huh,
me. They whooped me. There's a difference. I'll tell you,
uh-huh.
one of the things where one of the reasons why I'm waiting until I leave the area I'm in right now, Monterey, for to look for a therapist is because I know what Monterey looks like. I ain't sitting on no couch talking to a white man about my problems. Not
And that's your
happening.
choice. That's your
Like
choice.
I highly doubt that I will feel comfortable doing that. And if I have to spend my own money, I'm not going to pay you to figure out if I want to do this, because I look at you, I think, I don't know, man. And you speak about representation. I think representation is so important. Real quick, shout out to Candace for watching the live. I appreciate you, young
Yeah, hey
queen.
Candace.
But I'm looking forward. I look forward to. So I'm not looking forward to nothing. I'm talking about you represent being that representation that we need. Someone who not only can say, "Hey, man, I know that you don't want to do this because I come from where you come from, but here's how it helped me." Because I'm telling you, you remember that night we went to Don Vito's, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of just sat down and we just had a vulnerable conversation. And it was really where our Bahrain crew started getting into a way more vulnerable bag, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had it not been for those conversations, I wouldn't have thought twice about going to a therapist. Man, I don't need no therapy. I'm fine. Like, my
Mm-hmm.
daddy ain't go to no therapist. My mom ain't go to no therapist. They ain't go through what I, man, come on now. But being that comfortable also let me know that you don't necessarily need a licensed professional to help you find your happy place. You need a support system around you who loves you and who will listen to you. And I remember seeing some of the posts like, men hanging out with your boys, getting drunk, getting high, hooping, talking to your friends ain't therapy. You need to go to a therapist. Whoa, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the crew of people you have around you, because if you have a good group of people around you who you can be honest with, and sometimes you don't even want advice, you just want to vent, just let somebody listen. If you have a group of friends where you can be vulnerable with them, it's absolutely beautiful. What I love about the dynamic of me and Wayne and Chew and Candace and Rick, like we built a group where like, especially like me, Wayne, Chew, and Candace are in a group text where we just talk about almost anything on any given day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And half of that stuff is, let me just say this. I don't care what y'all's response is. I just want to say it to somebody who cares about me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then sometimes I don't want your response, but you give me a response that is good. And it's like, wow, man, I realize there are people who I've been close to for so long, and we don't talk about stuff like this. We don't talk about the stuff that is important to us, what hurts us, what makes us think, what makes us feel. And I try to bring that same energy to my other friends who we don't necessarily have those conversations. It's like, hey, man, talk about your feelings, bro. Ain't nothing wrong with talking about your feelings, being sensitive, saying you hurt. Like, ain't nothing worse than your hearing a friend saying, "Nah, bro, I don't care about that, man." No, bro, it's okay. It's okay to hurt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We all been hurt before. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that my friend group, I'll say 97% of them, we can all have those conversations. But look, as we begin to wrap this podcast up, what do you think is next? How do we talk about these generational curses, this trauma that we've dealt with. We talked about the importance of the household and how it builds your blueprint. And our community has not been educated on mental health. We run away from that. What is it that we can do to move forward to ensure that we're more healthy people?
Start having these conversations. Start normalizing these kind of conversations. And I like that you said that. I don't come from the practice where I think like, oh, you need to talk to a professional all the time. You need, in my profession, like I always to remind people, therapy is supposed to be short term, right? I mean, unless you have significant trauma where you need, significant long term therapy, it's supposed to be short term. It's supposed to help you unpack these things, but you're supposed to really fall back on is your community, your natural support. So in your community, start having the conversation and, like you said, normalize feelings. Normalize being sad, being angry. Just don't shame people for having feelings, male or female. Men cry. It's okay, right? Like
I cry all the
it's
time
nothing.
still. I love to
Well,
cry.
well, and then if you don't cry, it turns into anger. And then we look at you like, why is this person so angry? So moving forward, you definitely just need to have the conversations. Introduce your friends to wonderful mental health topics. I don't like that we talk about mental health only when there's some big celebrity has died about it. I mean, it could be a good way to catapult the conversation, but I think we need to always talk about wellness, well-being, healthy, well-rounded people outside of just death. Yes,
Don't
people
get
do
me
die.
started. Please don't get me started on the amount of value we put into celebrities because we think what they say is important because they're talented and they be
Yeah.
dumb as hell.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to go down there, but
Oh,
yeah,
I
because
broke it. I broke it. Finally, there we go. That's what I see in the DM sometimes. There we go. Took
I've
an hour.
I've had that perspective for a while, but I think that once again that's our culture and that's what we do. But if you have the privilege to be able to step out into a whole different world and learn these things, share it. Don't hold on to it. There's wonderful podcasts out there. There's TED Talks. There are wonderful people to follow on social media. If you follow, I share a lot of it all the time because I just know, even within my own family, people, they know I'm a therapist, but they don't really talk about it either. So I try to just share the knowledge, and hopefully, it'll start to make some headway. And I think, especially now with the Black Lives Matter movement and COVID, we're all experiencing a collective trauma. And so you're going to have to take that next step to do something to address these experiences that you're feeling, that feeling of anger, sadness, disconnected, and just feeling lonely in a way that's healthy, right? Because people are going to respond, but you want people to respond in a healthy way. You don't want to start losing people because they don't know how to respond to all of the chaos that's happening in the world because you feel like you've lost control. So I mean, I do hope um, people just start grasping a little bit of what we talk about and share. And that's why I do like to come and talk on these kind of platforms because I know it's probably a platform I probably wouldn't engage with outside of my profession. So it gives me another way to engage and, start introducing people to, no, therapy doesn't mean that you're crazy. It means that you are healthy and you have acknowledged your areas of growth and you are willing to make some changes to start growing in a healthy way. Yeah.
So thank you so much for that, Marquita. I think that's a great way to conclude the podcast. If you do you want to give out your social media handle if there's anybody here listening and they want to find you and see the great posts that you put on your stories regularly for us to learn from?
Oh, sure. It's Jador Key. It's Jad0REQui. Maybe you'll have to tag me too later, so they'll.
I'll tag you and I'll also drop it in the iTunes box for the
Oh, yeah.
description of it. Thank you for so much Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm about to end the broadcast, but don't sign off yet. Hey, this is my good friend Marquita. Like I say, she's part of the Brain Trust. Like I talk to her often, run a lot of ideas by her, and she's been an integral part of my development as a person, embracing the importance of looking at my mental health, and also just like somebody who'll say, "Hey, bro, you tripping." Um, so I thank her so much, and I'm so happy that she came on the podcast. Big baby